have come up, but I think one of my curiosities has been around what are some of the tenets and some of the aspects that you feel is needed to create the enabling environment, to create an enabling environment for collaboration? What is so key and how do you do it? Can you go a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, thanks, Marlene. I just want to respond to some of Simon's important points that he raised. In the retreat that we hosted for the municipality, it was really interesting that even in a dysfunctional municipality, the sense of reality from both the municipal councillors and the senior management team was realistic. They knew that they weren't performing as well as they should, and their conscience allowed them to score themselves low on their efficiency and effectiveness. And that for us is a really important, I suppose it's much like an alcoholic and wanting treatment. You know, you've got to recognize that you're not in a good space before you make the change to be in a better space. And so that was quite important. And the process of getting to that was also quite interesting. And it was really COVID and digital meetings that took us to that point. Because what we did initially is talk to individual managers without peers and have an honest conversation with individuals. And people are much more comfortable initially talking without their peers and raising issues more freely than they would. And then the second process was then to put them with some of their peers. And because they had already raised some of the issues, they were happy to re-raise them and then re-raise them in a broader context as well. So as people get more comfortable raising an issue, the more likely they are to raise it in broader community dialogue sessions. And it was interesting that we found very few people that didn't have an ethical intent. And yet it was the system that really depleted them. They were browbeaten by the municipal system over time. And we need to protect these people now. We need to, and I can't remember the word Kagiso used in his paper. I used the word affirm people. We need to take and build a new constituency of ethical, functional leaders in our municipal spaces. And not only leaders, because it can also be people in their own right, can also be leaders in their various departments and their function. They don't have to be identified senior management team leaders to effect the change, but they can take an ethical perspective up front. So it was really important that when you get people on their own, the logic of collaboration and the logic associated with the need for change is present. And one needs to just try and work on that ethical perspective and take people forward. What we also found is and I can't remember who asked the question about people don't know how to engage. And I think one of our main functions in our pilot site was not to try and provide people with a silver bullet to change things, but really to facilitate the participation in the dialogue and activities that would ultimately lead to change. And so even at the moment, and creating this type of behavior change doesn't happen in 1 or 2 years. It's an ongoing process forever that needs to be driven through institutions in a municipality. But the minute you provide people with the opportunity to participate, they then find their traction and they're able to participate meaningfully in these processes. But we must also understand that we mustn't be naive to think that everybody in our communities and our civil society wants to see the type of collaboration that we advocate. They don't. Many organizations in civil society and in our communities want polarization. They function better in a disruptive state than they do in a collaborative state. And this is often because it helps them pursue their narcissistic agendas and their ego agendas. And we've got to be ready for this and accepted as a reality. But once we get a significant groundswell of people that are ready to collaborate, it then becomes very difficult to fight against that trend. And so we expect that those leaders that prefer chaotic environments will eventually come on board, because there will be no space for people to lead that don't have the interest of the community at heart. And so and I suppose I've answered some of the aspects of building a collaborative environment. And we think that the broader the advocacy is for collaboration within community, the better. We need to help people understand their roles and responsibility as a community, as much as we need to help municipalities, officials and councillors understand their roles and responsibilities as a civil servant to serve the community. But it's a tough road for anyone to travel, but it's worth traveling, because the success is exponential once momentum is created. Thanks, Molly.
Thanks so much, Paul. Also, I'm wondering if you want to speak a little bit about the process of grooming more passionate people into inner work that you do.
Melinda, thanks. Paul, can you show me the slide? And I probably want to share with people on how this process of making people have these tough conversations, sometimes on how it builds and affirms people. And I want to share with you a story from a school where we facilitated this tough conversation. And it's a school that has been two schools, but we captured the sentiments of one of the principals. And because this process really is a process that makes people have these difficult conversations, but also create a safe space for people to feel that when they own up on the performance of their institutions, whether good or bad, they will not be slaughtered, right? And this statement gives you a good sense on how the affirmation process happened. This was one of the principals of a school, and there's a school on the top graph. This school was a school that was performing quite well and started dropping quite badly. And I think we were then asked to bring this school onto the retreat. And after the retreat, this is what happened in the school. And the principal says it, that the retreat is a very difficult process, right? People come wounded, but they also acknowledge, in order for them to grow, they needed to confront their inadequacies and things that they are not comfortable with, and that people had to give them feedback on how they're performing, but not with the intention of breaking them. The graph that is on top really shows you how that school, through the tough, difficult conversation around performance, started sustaining and how people were being held accountable on the performance of the school, particularly at subject level. And you can see how Ransani started performing. The interesting school is a school below, Mahaladi. It's a school, when it came to the retreat, right? It's a school that was performing average between 20, 30, 40%, and we brought it to the retreat on 2011. This was a very interesting conversation. We showed the school how we showed them the graph on how the school has been performing. And in the conversations, one of the participants, I suspect it was one of the head of departments, stood up in the workshop and said, if only I could take the principal of the school, throw the principal over the fence and lock the gate, I think the school would perform. And that's exactly what happened. The principal was changed. And there was absolute change on how that school started performing. And that shows you how difficult honest conversations sometimes can affirm people, but also can change the culture of accountability. And obviously, when people start accounting, there's no way in which performance cannot improve. And this is really what affirmation does to individuals. And when people are affirmed, they easily stand up and say to people, guilty as charged. I think I let you down. And not fearing that because they've disclosed that they've let the team down, their heads are going to be chopped. And this is what this tough, honest conversation really assists organizations to achieve.
Thanks so much, Otto. That's such good insight, and also the journey walked with the school. I think the reflection on accountability, but also vulnerability to stand up and say, I am part of this function and part of what's not working, and also recognizing what needs to change. And that change will be hard, but if it's done, it makes a difference. So thanks for that. There's a question on our Facebook page around, well, someone is asking for assistance. Mhlengi is asking, and he's Mhlengi from KwaZulu-Natal is asking for assistance, and the question, do we have to apply? How do we apply? How do we get in touch with? I think there's many others who are asking that same question. So, Paul.
Yeah, before we get into the contact information, I just want to I've just been reflecting on some of those questions that came up, and I think what's really important in the role of a facilitator of collaboration is that if you are trying to build a collaborative environment, you have to be collaborative. So the danger is, whilst trying to be collaborative, you get drawn into taking sides on local issues. And taking sides on local issues really just depletes trust between you as a facilitator of collaboration and the work you're trying to do. So whenever you trying to build a collaborative environment, remain focused on the core intent, which is to enable people to be more collaborative and allow local stakeholders to solve their own issues. And don't try and solve the issues for them. I think that's the only way we can build a sustainable collaborative environment that's not dependent on an external provider. With regard to the contact information, I'll go back a bit. I have put some contact information up on the screen. People can, I prefer if people would email me if they're interested in more information. And then we're happy to have a conversation. We hope to have more of these conversations around the country at some point. We want to try and build a groundswell of collaborators throughout the country so that we can start changing the narrative of how municipalities and communities should collectively engage to change the status quo. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. And I think part of the question around can we apply or how do we, is the level of readiness and the invitation into, we have a challenge, come and help us and come and support us. I think that's the ask. And Magdalena on the chat also says, knowing community as a municipal leader or from community talents. Can you speak a little bit more about what's the call to action, as for from both of you, the call to action from leaders and engaging with communities and building the relationship? What's the work that needs to be done for leaders to know who they are serving and to listen deeply to the voices of those that they are serving?
Can I try and tackle that first? So I think what we really have to do, and our common problem, and I'm talking about the municipal institution as we see it, is that municipalities at the moment are inward and upward focused. That means that we are really concerned about our political masters, and we're concerned about our own position in the municipality and how we fit into that dysfunctional system and how we can maybe protect our space. What municipal leaders really need to do is we need to be more downward focused and outward focused, which means we need to be really concerned about how we empower our employees and extract the best out of our employees to serve our communities? How do we empower them to take decisions? How do we empower them to connect to the issues in a meaningful way that enables them to pitch up every day, as Kagiso said, to earn a salary and not to get a salary? And then outward focused, how do we as a municipality focus on being community centric in terms of our execution? How do we make sure that we are delivering according to community expectations? And how do we meet the needs of some of our most marginalized communities? Because as municipalities become more dysfunctional, the people who feel the brunt of that impact is generally our marginalized communities, who are so dependent on state support, whether it be free basic services or in terms of financial support. So that would be my advice to municipalities. But I think that doesn't only apply to municipalities. Our communities need to be very conscious about the way they've been led to think about their community and the way people are, or leaders are trying to polarize communities. And again, I would urge communities to take responsibility for their role in local governance, to ensure that they hold municipalities to account and also to participate in the socio-economic development planning process. We need more community-centric development to make sure that our communities and our business environments are prosperous. Thanks, Moni.
Melinda, I think for me, I would probably reflect more on in saying I suspect we need to go back to the late 80s, early 90s, where there was a deliberateness in building capacity of community-based organizations. And I think there's probably a huge need for organizations like Kagiso to probably go back to what Kagiso used to do in those years, where there was a deliberateness in building the capacity of community-based organizations. And I think there's eagerness from community stakeholders to be assisted in building the leadership capability of community activists that are involved in facilitating local processes for integrated sustainable development. And I think for me, there's a huge opportunity for programs that build capacity at that level.
Thanks, Kagiso. So earlier on, before we started, we spoke about this new act that's emerging, the Municipal Systems Act, and the amendments to it. So Deborah's got a question. What, in your view, will be the impact of signing into law the recent amendments to the Local Municipal Systems Act? And some portion of it reflect on disallowing municipal officials from holding political office.
Well, that's a very interesting one. I think we facilitated a conversation. I strongly believe, I think, that amendment should be supported. We facilitated a conversation at one of the municipalities, and quite interestingly, both the municipal manager and the mayor were from one political party. But it seems as if the municipal manager probably was more connected to the most powerful in the political structure, and the mayor was not that connected. Fine, and that had a huge impact on the mayor being able to hold the municipal manager accountable. I remember we facilitated a conversation with the two of them, and we said they must write down the two things that they did that made the municipality to underperform. It was very interesting that the mayor actually wrote that the one thing that I did or I do is not to hold the municipal manager accountable, because the municipal manager is connected to a far more powerful grouping within the organization. And that was quite a revealing experience. And I think that's what you find in most municipalities. right? And I think that amendment, for me, I think I haven't engaged in what the implications are, but at face value, I think that amendment is quite important, where you're going to have to make a call if somebody is a public servant. That person can be and is also a politician. You have a huge problem where somebody who is a manager and possibly wants also to play into the political space. I think that experience for me just showed that there was a need for that amendment to be supported.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, Marlene. I support that, and I think we must be a bit wary of legislation fixing our problems. And I'll give you an example. I was at the presenting to a portfolio committee on municipal performance just a while back, and we were talking about collaboration and stakeholder engagement in terms of some of the challenges the municipality was facing. And it was interesting that the chair of the portfolio committee stood up and said that, in fact, in terms of legislation, if the municipality doesn't engage stakeholders in the way that was being recommended by stakeholders, they are in fact breaking the law. So the fact that the law exists and people are supposed to apply the law, it really boils down to the integrity of individuals who are custodians of applying that law in their various circumstances. So we must appreciate the fact that legislation and policy does guide the process, but we must also understand that it is people in the end of the day that have to implement those policies and processes. And so let's make sure that we set up the right structures to hold those that are leading our institutions and organizations, that they do implement the policies that are defined, because our policies are very good and we should be following them better than we are at the moment. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Paul. I think, as also said earlier on, the ask is really for civil society and everyone else to form part of the action that needs to happen. And someone's comment around educating and being aware of what are the issues, what's the processes, and how to get involved within that. As we envision and hope and visualize and act towards what good governance can be, I'm so curious, Paul and Potso, for you, what is your highest hope within this? And what excites you most about doing this work, and why? Like, what's the message of hope? I see in the chat as well, some of the participants saying, we are hopeful, and I love that. So what excites you most about the work, and what's your highest hope as we move forward?
I think the highest hope for me going forward is the responsiveness of people to actually realize the importance of the importance of their role in change. And after numerous discussions with hundreds of people, I've yet to find a person that doesn't think that collaboration and active citizenry and good leadership can transform municipalities. In many conversations, civil society and communities are no longer interested in, or becoming less interested in, which political party leads the municipality. What they're really interested in is put the right people in charge so that they can lead the municipality effectively. And for me, I think there's very few people that don't, at an ethical level, understand the logic that radical collaboration is the right solution, and it can make significant difference to communities, including those marginalized communities that need it the most.
Marlene, for me, I think what excites me is probably the work that Paul is involved in, where they're building a coalition of grassroots organizations collaborating. For me, I think we must accept it that the World Committee system hasn't assisted communities to input and to hold local government politicians and officials accountable. And I do think there is a need to create a far more broader-based coalition of organizations where people have no motives and agendas that serve their own interests. And for me, it's just sad that the one structure that was supposed to assist and work with local government is more a tool used by politicians for their aspirations of becoming seasoned politicians, and not seen as a structure that's supposed to mobilize community voices around co-creating communities that people want.
Thanks so much, Otto. That's so true. Last quick question before we end. I know that both of you do your own work towards modeling and showing up and being the bridging leaders, the collaborators, the partners that we want to see in this world. So what is it that you do for yourself, and how do you self-care as you show up in this work to build relationships towards collaboration?
That's probably the most difficult. That's probably the most difficult question for people who do the work that we do. And you're right. I think we need to create spaces where we connect with ourselves and energize, always to renew ourselves. I think for me, one of the big things that this process has helped me is to reflect with my team at work and always inculcate the idea that when things go wrong, the question should always be, but what is your role in it? It can't be the next person. I sometimes say to people, you're not voicing your unhappiness, you're actually complicit. Right? You're not asking the questions when you have a different view, you're complicit. And I think for me, that's what I think I would like to see us building in organizations for people to understand. You just asking the question, right, could unravel and assist the organization to move forward.
I think, yeah, that's an unfair question, Marlene, but nevertheless, I think for me, progress can be quite slow in our environment, and circumstances that of the people that we engage is often desperate. But I always sort of am grateful for the opportunity to try and contribute in some way to a solution. And it does remind me of that, and I can't remember the exact words, but it says, if you plant a tree today from the seed, in 10 years' time, somebody will be able to sit in the shade. And I think it's trying to latch onto those green shoots that we see on a daily basis in our community that we serve, and the appreciation that we get from many people that we engage that continues to drive us. And it's also, it is quite a privilege to work for an organization that has a social conscience to focus on driving change in some of the areas that many people have forgotten and discard. And so we keep reflecting on the privilege we have to play in the space. And whilst we keep reflecting on that, it does motivate us to keep going and take advantage of the opportunity that's presented to us. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you both for those reflections. Thanks, Khotso. Thanks, Paul. A lot of chatter in the chat as well, appreciating your wisdom. So we really appreciate what the conversation has been and the input. Thank you for joining us online. We have reached our end time. And just an appreciation to the Kagiso team, and also the generous offering from the Empire Foundation partners for the space and this amazing tech team who've supported us. I'm saying it wrong. It's Empire Partners Foundation, right? Thank you. And so with that, thank you for joining us. Some of the information will be shared on the website, Kagiso website, and also on Empire Partners Foundation YouTube link. And keep in touch with Paul, reach out to him, and we thank you for joining us. Have a good day. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Marlene. Bye.
Thank you.